Okay, let's see. There we go. What's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast. We've been gone a minute, but we are back. The world is fucking hot as hell. It kind of feels like hell outside, whether you're in Texas like me or my good friend over there, Danny Torkel, up in NYC.
Yeah.
But Danny, we're going to be talking about some creatures from hell coming up and messing around with some innocent people in the Exorcist TV show. Are you excited?
Yeah. I've been revisiting this show. I watched season 1 back when it was on TV, and so I'm happy to be revisiting. A few people, including our Lassercast original teammate Chris, have vouched for season 2 being better than season 1. So I'm excited to get through this rewatch of season 1 and get to season 2. But I'm enjoying this. It's much better to be sitting inside with the fan on watching this show than it is to be outside in the humidity.
Absolutely. You know, it's funny that you say that because a lot of people that I've talked about the show with, like if I posted on social media and stuff, they always kind of say the same thing, that they really liked season 1, but then they didn't watch season 2.
Oh,
I wonder if like season 2 when it came out, because this show came out on Fox of all channels. I wonder if like season 2 just got buried somewhere and a lot of people didn't see it.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. I did enjoy the show, and then we always talk about like how I've never seen, like you always tell me about Succession, and I haven't watched it, and I didn't watch Breaking Bad, and I got to a point a few years ago where I kind of fell out of love with TV.
Mm-hmm.
And I just figured a better use of my time viewing would be to just watch movies. And I feel like, because the way I always look at things is, if I'd rather watch a really shitty 90-minute movie or a 100-minute movie where, okay, I wasted an hour and 45 minutes. It's over. It sucked. Whatever. I move on. Whereas, and we kind of were on this path, it felt like, with Yellow Jackets, which we reviewed, where you invest hours and hours and hours of your life with a TV show, especially a 60-minute block of television where it's anywhere from 45 minutes if it's a commercialized show to a full hour if it's on like a streaming channel. And you can, you know, if that show doesn't end in a way that you like, you don't just feel like you wasted 100 minutes. You feel like you've wasted like days out of your fucking life. And it's really funny, actually, to bring it back to The Exorcist. This show was created by Jeremy Slater, who created the Umbrella Academy on Netflix. Why do I bring that up? Because I really love season 1 of the Umbrella Academy, and that's all I ever watched of it. And I just, and so your reaction is exactly my wife's reaction. Athena loves that show, fucking loves it. It's one of her favorite shows. She begs me to come back, and I'm like, you know something? I can't. It's been too far. I would have to rewatch all of season 1, and I just don't want to make that type of commitment. There are a few shows that I do watch. I've fallen behind on a lot of the MCU shows. I do watch The Boys, but I was able to binge through a lot of that. So I do like the idea that we're covering a show that's over. So I don't have to worry about catching up to a future season. Like, there's a finite endpoint. We're going to do 4 episodes, 2 episodes per season of this show. And I'm excited for that.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up Jeremy Slater, because I did a little research, and besides that, show that you mentioned, Umbrella Academy, he's also done a few episodes of Moon Knight. Like, he wrote a couple of the MCU show Moon Knight episodes. He wrote the original screenplay for that Fantastic Four movie that came out. Fan Four Stick, yes. And I think it was changed a lot from his original draft to what it became.
If he wrote the original script, then I would venture to say you'd be lucky if 30 to 40% of his script is in that movie.
Exactly. Yeah, I think it was supposed to have like Galactus and all this kind of crazy stuff. Also, I should do a little plug since we're talking about comic book stuff. Brian, my co-host on Comic Books Transformed, and I covered the Umbrella Academy, the whole show so far on our channel. So if you like Umbrella Academy, go on over to that channel, Comic Books Transformed, and check that out. But going back to Jeremy Slater, I was really surprised that he was the guy behind the scenes. I thought when I watched this show, I was like, this kind of reminds me of Sleepy Hollow, that show on Fox. Like, it was weird because like Fox in general, right? We just sort of, when we say Fox nowadays, we just think of like Fox News, right? We just think it's like that pretty much. Even though Fox for years and years had fictional shows like the X-Files and, you know, Mantis, Married with Children. I don't know why the fuck I stuck Mantis in there out of all things, right? Do you remember that show?
I don't, but like for me, Fox has always meant The Simpsons.
Right.
Like when I was a kid, when I moved into my apartment when I was 8 years old, we didn't have cable, and in my room the antenna couldn't pick up Fox, and I was so upset because I was an 8-year-old. It was 1990, and all I wanted to watch was The Simpsons and midnight Saturday nights. Tales from the Crypt on Fox.
Yes, of course, yes.
Which is one of like my gateways into horror.
Yeah, and so like the fictional TV just got stripped away on Fox over time, right? And then you would have this random show like Sleepy Hollow, which would have like real horrific imagery in it, but it'd be like a serialized show. And then you have The Exorcist. And I thought that maybe the creators of Sleepy Hollow went on to make this show, but no, it's this Jeremy Slater guy. And it's really interesting because I usually start off our shows going, hey, blah, blah, blah fans, Evil Dead fans, hey, you know, Wes Craven fans. And I was going to say, hey, Exorcist fans, but I don't think The Exorcist is like a franchise where people are into it the way they are into other horror franchises.
And maybe that's why this show only went 2 seasons. Because like even when you said Sleepy Hollow, if you held a gun to my head and said what channel was Sleepy Hollow on, I would have said the WB or the CW, because it just felt like a Teen Wolf, a Vampire Diaries, like those were horror shows that I watched with Athena, and like we got into those shows, but that's like a very specific style of show.
Yeah,
and like The Exorcist is such a hardcore horror property. That, you know, it's such a rated R property that the idea of it being on regular TV and not like on a Netflix or a HBO Max, you know, this was obviously 2016 before HBO Max was even a thing, or HBO Max isn't a thing anymore. But it just, I feel like maybe horror fans maybe didn't commit to it because, oh, come on, what can an Exorcist show really be on TV? They also had like a short-lived Damien show, which I think I watched 1 season of. I think it was only on for 1 season. But I reviewed that when I was writing for Geeks of Doom, and that ended after 1 season. That was based on The Omen. Yeah. And it just feels like those shows, those are horror movies that are so, I don't know what the word is. They're very rated R. They're very steeped in like the movies are so famous. Yeah. That, you know, there's no like, it's not like Vampire Diaries, which was like a young adult book series that you can stretch out. Yeah. So it felt like, you know, they do kind of feel like cash grabs in a way, even though they are well-made shows with good people behind them, good casts. I mean, freaking Gina Davis is in this. She's an Oscar winner. Yeah. You know, Alan Ruck is in this. He's been famous since we were friggin' kids. You know, so Sharon Gless comes in at the end of episode 5. Friggin' Cagney from Cagney and Lacey. So, like, this show has a really good, strong pedigree behind it. Oh, yeah. So, I just don't know if The Exorcist is that name, that property name that is going to draw mainstream fans to a weekly show. Yeah. Well, you say property name, but we think of these things nowadays in terms of franchises, right? And I don't really feel like The Exorcist
is a franchise. You know, we essentially bypassed the second movie utterly. It's just like, oh, it doesn't exist. And we covered number 1 and we covered number 3. And last week or 2 weeks ago when we reviewed number 3, we kept saying how you could almost just make it a standalone movie and it could have no connection to The Exorcist at all. So I feel like it's not really a franchise the way that, like, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street or Alien.
It's very funny because, yes, of course, it's technically there's an Exorcist franchise. The original, we don't need to talk about. It stands on its own legs. Part 2 is so universally loathed that nobody talks about it, even though there was a guy wearing an Exorcist 2 The Heretic shirt at Horror Trivia the other night.
Oh, my God.
Shout out to Final Exam Horror Trivia on Twitter and to Rock Bar New York for hosting. Fucking great night. Nice. And, you know, and then Exorcist 3, which William Peter Blatty wrote and directed based on his book, but it was kind of coaxed into being Exorcist 3 from its original title of Legion. Right. Then there's this amazing debacle of the prequel to The Exorcist, where there's effectively two entirely different movies, where one of them is like a complete reshoot, and it was a disaster in the production stages. So there are 4 Exorcist movies, but they almost have nothing linking them aside from 1 and 3 with some of the characters.
Yes.
And so whereas like Michael Myers is the character of all the Halloween films, and Freddy Krueger is the, you know, antagonist of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, and, you know, Jason carries the Friday the 13th franchise.
Yeah.
This is, like you said, this isn't that franchise. Like, you could make Halloween into a syndicated show, and there are probably enough mainstream not horror fans, mainstream fans who just know Halloween. They know that music. They know Michael Myers. And, you know, like MTV did a Scream show, and it ran for, I think, 3 seasons. I think it did like 2 seasons and then maybe 1 on streaming. And at least that is like, oh, that's a franchise with, now we're up to, that was only after 4 movies. Now we're up to 6 movies. It's pumping along. Yeah. I mean, you know, we're almost 13 minutes in. We've barely talked about this show.
Right. So I could get us back on track. But, I mean, this is all interesting shit. You know, a lot of times on podcasts, people kind of dilly-dally and they talk about random shit. I think that if you're here to talk about the Exorcist show from 2016, this is probably kind of interesting to you, right?
Oh, yeah. I wasn't like, we need to get back on track, because I'm doing most of the talking as usual. I mean, you guys, like 3 years, you just got to learn to tell me to shut the fuck up.
But I love it. I sit here, man. That's the whole thing. Like, your love for horror.
No, I think you did bring up a good point, though, with like why, you know, The Exorcist it's a very strange movie to try to turn into because again, another thing that I'm also kind of overlooking is, when did The Exorcist come out? 1973.
Yeah.
So like, our parents were in their like late teens, early 20s.
Yeah.
When The Exorcist came out. The Exorcist is older than my parents' marriage. And so it's like, what was the target audience for this show? Was it 50-year-olds, or was it like 60-year-olds back in 2016 who had seen this in their early 20s and are now like, you know, it's like, it's not something like a Scream where that came out in 96. So you have 40-year-old fans who have kids now who are in their teens who might want to watch it, and we can watch it together. It's very strange. It's a weird.
Yeah. I didn't do a lot of research into the genesis of the show. I did kind of very basic research because I have so much I want to say about the individual characters in the episodes. But a lot of times I like to know the backstory of like why they decided to focus on this, to bring this franchise back, to go in a certain direction. To me, I think like, okay, well, what was around this time in like 2016. So I'm assuming that like the Conjuring universe was kind of like midway building up. That was probably a big deal for horror people. You know, Supernatural had just been around for like ever, and this show kind of reminds you of Supernatural in certain ways, but it's not like hokey like that. You brought up CW stuff before, and I feel like this show kind of is like a cut above all of that. It's not necessarily like on the level of like an HBO Max show or like something on AMC, but it's like somewhere in between. It's like a little bit below Interview with the Vampire, but above CW stuff, right?
Yeah, I feel like this show, if it had been on a streaming channel, and if it was allowed to go into hard R territory for a little bit, like, and by that I mean, you know, if we could have gotten some, you know, Pazuzu dialogue from that original movie, you know, your mother sucks cocks in hell.
Right.
If we could have gotten some shit like that, or some like at least one or two moments of like real graphic bloodshed. There is some crazy shit that happens in this show, and we're only going to talk about the first 5 episodes of the first season in this video. But even in that video, even in those first 5 episodes, there's some good horror stuff. It's just knowing the original Exorcist, it's a step down, you know, and even having covered The Exorcist 3, I feel like The Exorcist 3 described things that were more haunting than a lot of the stuff that they even show in this show.
Yes.
But again, we're talking about a movie, a rated R movie versus a mainstream
network
TV show. And by the way, we haven't really spoiled anything yet. We're over 15 minutes in. If you haven't seen this show, it is streaming on Hulu. So you can go watch both seasons on Hulu, and we won't spoil anything for you. We are going to start spoiling it right about now.
Yes, sir. Yeah. So there actually is something that happens in the second episode, and we'll lead up to it, but I still think about it. It's like really disturbing and upsetting. It's at the very end of the second episode. We'll get up to that though. I wanted to go through this the way that we do most of our regular shows. Like we covered Yellow Jackets on my other channel. We did Raised by Wolves. And in those shows, we would kind of go character by character. And usually we like to go from the least interesting story arcs to the most interesting story arcs. So for me, I kind of wanted to see how you felt about this, Danny. But to me, the most interesting part of the show so far is the family, the Rance family. And in particular, the girl that is possessed. Like, I think that's the most interesting part of the show. What do you think?
I think it's a little hard for me to pick a most interesting thing. I think there's a lot of interesting stuff in this show. I like both of the priests and their stories. I like the family. I like all 4 members of the family, which is very rare for me to like. I'm usually like, oh, God, more with this character. Come on. But like, I actually enjoy the way this show has this family of 4. The way the show even starts, where you're kind of led to believe that one daughter is going to be possessed.
Right.
And then it like diverges and it's actually the younger daughter.
Right.
And I thought that was a really interesting way to go for the show.
Yeah.
I love the character played by Robert Emmett Looney, who is I guess the demon.
Yes. Okay. So the salesman.
That's salesman.
That's what he's listed as. Yeah. And let's kind of lead up to him because I have a lot to say about him. Super interesting. You're right. The family is great. When it comes to these like network shows or even streaming shows, and if they're kind of a dark, twisted show, there's usually like, and it's gonna sound a little bit misogynistic, but like usually the wife character or the daughter character can be like the annoying character on the show. I know that sounds really bad, but it's just the way that it's written. Like on Breaking Bad, a lot of people didn't like Skylar, the wife. On Homeland, there was this daughter that was just like, ugh, this daughter's awful, right? On this show, I feel the same way as you. Like every member of this 4-person family is great. And it's not like, oh, this scene is not interesting because it's featuring this person. I'm interested in everyone's story. But I think that we should go through the priests first because the advertising kind of focuses on them and it focuses on the possessed girl a lot. I want to say
it's funny the advertising doesn't focus on Gina Davis because I I would
Yeah.
have to check IMDb because I know she was in. Was it called Commander in Chief, where she
Yeah,
played the president? Where she
Right,
was,
right.
and like that was a fairly big series, and
Yeah.
I feel like that ended, and this was like her follow up TV project to that, and so she had like kind of become like a big name for TV, and
Yeah.
maybe that was. And like again, this is an Oscar-winning actress. I mean, she won her Oscar way back in I think the mid '80s for God, The Accidental Tourist. I think that's it.
Oh,
If I'm wrong, somebody will correct me.
yeah.
But like, I grew up with Gina Davis, like kicking ass in The Long Kiss Goodnight, and
Yeah.
like making a whole like she was a big time film star, and so her playing the mom here, and with Alan Ruck as her husband, I think it's like it's such a cool thing to see these like two standout actors from my entire life, basically in the '80s, now being parents, and the two girls that they have are both really good. But yeah,
Yeah.
the priests are also really good.
So okay, so for the priests, right? That you have this one Mexican priest, then you have the British priest, and Ben Daniels plays the British priest, Father Marcus Keene. Ben Daniels, did you recognize him by any chance when you saw him?
He's got a face that I'm sure I've seen before, but I
Yeah.
didn't know exactly where.
So I'm a big fan of him. He was on the show House of Cards. That's the first time I ever saw him with Kevin Spacey and
Oh,
Robin
okay,
Wright.
there you go.
So he's on that. He's like an artist that's was a former lover of Robin Wright.
Okay.
Okay. So then besides that, he's in Rogue One. He's like one of the main pilots at the end battle. He was on this Netflix show called Jupiter's Legacy, which Brian and I covered too on our other channel. So I like him. He's definitely like a genre actor. I think he's really, really good in this. Alfonso Herrera plays Father Tomas Ortega, and he's like extremely charismatic. But out of the two priests, I don't find his storyline anywhere near as interesting as Father Keene's.
I agree. What's up? Oh, I agree with you, but I also think it in like a weird little thing. I've now watched two shows in a row where a priest ends up having a pretty sexual affair with somebody.
Nice.
Spoiler for Fleabag on Amazon Prime.
Oh yeah.
But that was a great show too.
Agreed.
But yeah, I didn't like. I did not like. I like his story with like the diocese, and I like his approach to being a priest and the way he handles the Rance family. His other kind of illicit side, I wasn't like a huge fan of. I thought Father Marcus's story is much more in line with. He almost feels like a Father Marin type, which I guess for this show he's basically playing that. He's not Father Marin, of course, but he's a Father Marin like stand-in.
Right. And this show, even though it is related to The Exorcist, we're going to explain how. It's still thematically very similar. Like you have these priests that they live in the real world, and this is a main theme that's in the original Exorcist, and it's a main theme in Exorcist 3, which we talked about 2 weeks ago, where they're just faced with the ugliness and the horror of the world, besides there being demons. And they still go to work every day as priests. They still try to be positive and change the world, but they have to face all this ugliness, right? And I think that's in both of their story arcs. They live. The whole show takes place in Chicago, and Chicago has as much a presence in the show as Washington D.C. has in the Exorcist films, right? Where you see the people that live there. There's creepy ass people that live there. It can be a bleak place, even when you're like in a crowded park or something like that. You still kind of feel lonely. That like this evil can touch you. It's a real interesting show in regards to like tackling faith and evil in the modern day. Like, do you agree with that? Or
yeah, and like with the big city, especially like a Chicago or New York or Washington, you're always going to have an element of like socio-political, socioeconomic factors.
Right.
And I think we see that a lot with like the whole character of Father Ortega, especially like trying to appeal, the whole idea of being like an immigrant priest, and, appealing to, trying to convince the diocese to, help him build up the community. And, so I do like that aspect of it. I genuinely think this show is a good show. And I think the strength of it is all of these characters. Like I said, there isn't one character that is on the screen where I'm just like, oh God.
Yeah.
And whenever that happens, whether it's a movie or a TV show, I know I'm watching something that I'm going to enjoy.
Right. Really good point. Yeah. And there are stand-ins, right? Because you already compared Tomas to Marin, right? Or actually, you compared
Marcus to
Marin. But I kind of feel like Marcus is a little bit of Marin, but he's also the, what's his face? Max von Sydow. Yeah.
No. Father Marin is Max von Sydow.
Fuck. Yeah, that's right. Karras and Marin. Duh. Okay, good.
So yeah, Ortega, Father Ortega does feel like a Father Karras type.
Yeah.
Like that more local priest who is, very ingrained with the community, but has personal demons that are affecting him. And then you have this outsider priest who comes in who is like around the world conquering evil,
Yes. So have you ever seen Preacher, the show Preacher?
Another show. Absolutely loved the first 2 seasons, read the first book. And then the show continued and I just fell behind too far and I stopped watching it, but I loved it. It was great when it was on.
Yeah. I watched a little bit of the show. I read the whole comic, and in Preacher, you have this guy who comes from this horrible, horrible past and he becomes a preacher. Right. And he's kind of a jaded preacher, just like, Marcus in this show too. In Marcus's case, his fucking father killed his mother and he was an orphan. Right?
Yeah.
And it looks like they do show one flashback within the first 5 episodes that shows like he had to deal with like fucking exorcism shit even when he was just a little kid. You know? So he's been exposed to this crazy world. And one thing that I really liked about the first 5 episodes and Marcus's storyline so far is that you see there's actually like different approaches to exorcisms. Like it's not like you do this exact routine and you'll get the results. It's like he encounters these nuns in like the 3rd or 4th episode.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I really enjoyed that part. Like,
yeah,
I like that. One of the subtle, and it's weird to call this subtle, but one of the subtle things that this show does is so the Chicago is bracing for the arrival of the Pope. The Pope is coming to visit, and they keep having these posters up in the background. He is coming. And it's like, oh, they're advertising, come see the Pope when he comes. But as the Pope's visit is getting closer, there's this increased level of demonic activity. And so Father Keen goes to this, what's the word? Monastery?
They're almost... Oh, okay. Yeah. Nunnery, right? Like a nunnery? Yeah.
And he finds like these nuns who have a possessed guy there, but instead of like, I cast you out, demon, like reading from the Bible and throwing holy, they're like attacking the demon with love. And they're like saying nice things to him and telling him that he's loved and hugging him, and like even when he's like fighting and punching and spitting, they're like embracing him.
Yep.
And it actually ends up working. And Father Keen takes that to the possession case of the Rance family. And I thought that was such a cool idea because, I feel like The Exorcist kind of set a template. The 1973 film set a template for this is how an exorcism goes.
Right.
And
yeah.
there hasn't really been deviation from that exorcism template
Right.
in any movie, whether it's the exorcism of Emily Rose, whether it is, an episode of Supernatural.
Right.
It's like every exorcism scene since 1973 looks like Father Merrin and Father Karras going after Reagan and Pazuzu in the end of The Exorcist.
Right. The power of Christ compels you.
Yes.
I compel you. And she even, the main nun even makes this comment about how he's compelling the demon versus what they're doing. Yeah.
It's pushing and pulling, right?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Good point. Yeah. It's interesting, right? Because you bring up this Pope storyline, which is going through these first 5 episodes. I'm sure they're going through the whole season. The advertising for the Pope coming in this world, it looks like an advertisement for like a Conjuring spinoff, because it's just like his Pope, like, but from behind with his like collar up, and it's like, he is coming. It's like on all the buses and stuff. And that shit's going down. And one thing I really like with Marcus is that he's doing research, and he goes and he like meets with these people that do like a tour of the area and talk about all the grisly shit that's happened in the area. And he meets with them in their trailer, and they talk about how there's like a spike in energy and stuff. Like there's like this sort of demonic spike that leads to a disaster of some kind. And they're saying that this is what's happening right now, that there's something on the rise, Go ahead.
You know what it reminded me of? It reminded me of Ghostbusters Part 2.
Uh-oh.
Where like Vigo got his strength from like the anger of New York, and like the pink slime running through the city was like empowered by the anger and the hatred of the city. But then like as more people started clapping and singing, they were able to use like the pink slime for good. So like that whole idea of he is coming, but there's like all this anger boiling and demonic possession is spiking. I love those 2 characters on the tour bus. I thought it was such a funny scene. They're trying to tell the story of A.A. Holmes, and like people keep trying to interject. And they're like, we're not up to the question part.
Right. Yeah, have a spinoff with those 2 because they were real fun. All the stuff with like Marcus doing his little side quest and getting information, that's a show unto itself, right? Then you have this whole family aspect, but he keeps getting pushback from the diocese and from the church itself. There's one other priest who keeps kind of shutting him down, but then he eventually lets him in like, oh no, there's much more to this than you think. And he kind of sends him on his own individual mission. And what is a big sign for the priests is there's just this fucking horrible sacrifice that happens in the end of the 2nd episode. I that's the part that I'm talking about. So we're in spoilers at this point. I actually, my mind was sort of blown. I was like, oh shit, they showed that on TV. This reminded me of Exorcist 3 type stuff. Because basically you have the scene where the show starts off where there's this like African-American boy riding around on a bike, and you're like, okay, he's connected somehow to something that's going to happen. You don't know what's going to happen, right? And eventually, like, one of the last scenes is he shows up at his house, and in his house, his mom is getting murdered, but he's not paying attention. He's like got headphones on or something, and she's just getting murdered in another room. And then he goes like by the bathroom, and he has another relative in the bathroom where they're harvesting his organs in the tub. And he's just got this dead face. And then they just slit that fucking kid's throat too, right on. They slit his mom's throat. They slit his throat. And I was like, holy shit, they showed that on Fox? That's pretty fucking grisly.
And then George C. Scott had a dream where he said, oh, hi, Thomas. I'm sorry you were murdered.
There you go. Exactly. You're right. But there wasn't a fucking carp in the tub this time. It was this kid's like dad or something.
I thought you were going to say the scene that bothered you, the scene where they're all at the diocese and the man immolates out, and like this guy is just burning himself, and they find out that there was like no reason for the flames to start. It was like he spontaneously combusted. And at that point, you're like on the phone to the Pope, like, you should probably stay in the Vatican. Like,
yeah, don't come to the U.S. right now. It's not a good time. 2016 is not really a great time for the United States. But, I think that if we do talk about the Exorcist as a franchise, I think that if there's a staple of it, just like with Alien, with like the eggs and the face huggers and stuff, or like Scream with the phone calls, The Exorcist, you know you're going to see disturbing imagery. There's going to be some sort of sacrilegious, disturbing imagery. And they pretty much deliver on every single episode. There's some sort of disturbing thing that happens. So we talked a lot about the priest. I think we should talk about the family now and some of the horrible stuff that happens to them. The dad, he almost seems like the least important character in the family, but I find him to be so interesting. You keep talking about Alan Ruck and how much you like him. One little side note is that he's from Succession as well. Like he was in Succession recently, and he's one of the siblings, and I just fucking loved him on there as Connor. I was so happy to see him in this. But he's pretty interesting on the show, right? Because he has suffered from fucking brain injury.
Yeah, it feels like there's something going on with this family, like tragedy is surrounding the family. The father, as you said, Alan Ruck, he plays Henry. We learn through a series of kind of exposition dumps that he was involved in an accident where some kind of thing at a construction site fell on his head. Right. And he's basically been left diminished. Right. I don't know what the best word is. He's, one of the daughters like lashes out and is like, he's basically what does she call him? A puppet at this point, or
vegetable or
a vegetable.
Yeah.
He zones out. He doesn't pay attention. He doesn't have all the brain function he used to have. He's diminished. Right. But there is also some really touching character moments where he does have some levels of awakening later on in the series. The older daughter, Kat, whose name I didn't write down, the actress, but she's really good. She's like a dancer.
Brienne Howie.
She's a dancer, and she's in like a total depression because she was involved in a car accident that killed one of her friends.
Yep.
And the dance company is moving on. They're doing tributes to her. And the show starts with Gina Davis, the mom, Angela, starting to get convinced that something is wrong with Kat because of how disconnected she's being. And we find out, of course, that Kat is just fucking depressed and like torn apart because of what happened with her friend. And it's actually the younger daughter, Casey, who is the subject of the possession here, played by Hannah Kasulka.
Right.
There's an amazing scene in an attic in, I want to say, episode 2 or 3, that where you officially find out that Casey is the one possessed. And that scene, I thought, had some of the best genuine scares of the first 5 episodes.
Isn't it the first episode? Isn't it like the very end of the first episode?
Is it that? Yeah, it might have been. I literally woke up one morning at 6 a.m.
Yeah.
So like we were supposed to record this a few days ago. Life happens. We couldn't end up recording it. I was a little bit behind because of all my vacations. So I woke up, it was 6 o'clock in the morning. And instead of like rolling back over and going to bed, I was like, all right, Hulu. And by like 9:30 in the morning, with almost everybody in my house still sleeping, I had watched 4 out of 5 episodes.
Oh
so
my God.
They are literally all blending into one for me.
Yeah.
But there's this scene in an attic where Father Ortega Tomas goes upstairs and oh shit, like you get some like good Exorcist possession shit from Casey, and Hannah Kasulka does a phenomenal job,
right?
Playing, basically the Reagan McNeil, wink, of this show, because she's a beautiful young girl, and she has to basically become like she has to deteriorate on screen. Every episode, she is a little bit more deteriorated. And we find out the reason for this is the salesman, who is like her personal demon, played by Robert Emmett Looney or Looney, and he is, he gives her this locket or this mirror and convinces her to steal things that she wants. And it's kind of like, it literally does feel like the angel demon on the shoulder. He's the little demon on her shoulder, except he's, a full grown adult sitting on your shoulder, weighing your entire body down.
Yeah. That's what I actually really, really loved about this show. By the end of the first 5 episodes, she's almost like full blown Deadite. Like she's just like over the top, like crazy, like powerful, possessed girl by the end of the 5th episode. But yeah, that the salesman is this added twist that we haven't seen in the previous Exorcist movies. Whenever you think of these demons, you always kind of think of maybe some sort of like gargoyle looking thing that you can't really see. You always kind of picture like the way that Reagan or, Father Karras or whatever in the 3rd one looks with their eyes. Like you always picture they look something like that. But
Or
in this,
you just get that like freeze frame image of Captain Howdy from the original Exorcist of like, some like demon looking thing.
Yeah.
You don't think of it as like a regular human guy like this. And I love that it's not like I don't want to defame the actor, but it's not like a big name actor.
No.
He's a very plain looking guy.
Right.
He's not like this young, like,
sexy,
seductive.
Yeah.
It's not like Chris Hemsworth seducing a young girl.
Right.
It's just like this. It's kind of like this plays into Henry, Alan Ruck's character. It kind of feels like at first he's like a replacement father figure until he like kisses her on the train, which was a little weird.
Yeah.
But it's such a unique aspect of this show, especially for these first 5 episodes. And my favorite part of the whole fucking series is that as Casey deteriorates, he deteriorates.
Yes.
Like it almost feels like, and I've just done a complete Christopher Nolan Dark Knight trilogy rewatch because I'm prepping for Oppenheimer.
Nice.
And the way that like Aaron Eckhart's Harvey goes from like Harvey Dent, and then after he gets obviously burned, and where like he finally shows up and he's got his suit, half of his suit is destroyed, his face, and that's how the salesman goes every episode. He's a little bit more disheveled. His hair is a little bit out of place. His jacket is gross and dirty and covered in muck. And it just gets worse and worse as the episodes go on, as Casey is. And like one of the most haunting aspects of the original Exorcist was all the medical shit that Reagan has to go through.
Yeah.
And like they start to do that with Casey by episodes really 3, I guess. Episode 3, she's in the hospital, 2 and 3 maybe.
Yeah.
And so it's real, like it just works so well, like the deterioration of these 2 characters who are linked, because of the possession.
Yeah. So let's talk about like what actually happens to her because of this salesman, right? Like the way the show works, because I remembered it being the end of the first episode because they do this like kind of twist at the end, and they play the Exorcist music at the very end. They make you think it's this one daughter who doesn't want to go outside, who's like in the dark all the time. They make you think it's her. And then the other daughter just seems so positive and bubbly and light. Then at the very end, you have this attic scene, which did kind of remind me of something out of The Conjuring, right? Where they're in the attic and she's moving around really weird, right? And then she kind of says, oh, he killed a rat. She's convinced that that's what happened up there in the attic. She's convinced that Father Thomas killed a rat. Then throughout the episodes, like 2, 3, and 4, she has all these like little minor breakdowns where she sees weird things. There's like this plate of food at one point, and there's like frogs squirming all over it, and it's just gross. The scene that really stands out for her, where it's like, oh my God, we've gone to a whole nother level, is she goes to a memorial for her sister's friend that died. And she kind of has like an incident there, and she like leaves. her father goes with her, and they're on a train in Chicago. And this guy is like real aggressive with her on the train. Just the stuff he's saying to her, he's like right in her face. And it's like, oh man, you picked the wrong girl to mess with. And she essentially just like scratches up his chest to where it's just like chop meat, right? And then she just fucking breaks his jaw in another moment. That's just like, oh my God, this is on Fox. This is crazy. And it was just like so horrific. Right when she's done, she goes and she pees on the ground too, which is very much like Reagan in the first movie too. So she's like not just a like menace to herself. Like she's not just being hurt internally or externally. She's also like a dangerous character. Like in the original Exorcist, Reagan does kill people, you know, or like somehow the demon kills people, but you never really see it. It's
well,
always
that train sequence was like a bloodier version of the scene in the original where Reagan, they bring the doctor over to see her, and she like grabs him by the nuts, and there's that crazy camera angle that like follows him to the ground.
Yeah.
Like that's what that felt like. It was like that first like outward violent reaction.
Yeah.
And where like you're saying to yourself, there's something wrong with this. Like this isn't just a medical issue. This isn't just a girl going crazy. This is something more.
Right. And so that leads to her being arrested, and then she's in the hospital, and they're treating her like a psych patient. Gina Davis tries to get her out of the hospital, and she is successful through like a legal loophole. And then they go to perform the exorcism in the house. And, you know, we're up to like episode 4 at that point. I'm like, whoa, they're going to the exorcism right now. There's 10 episodes. I'm like, what's going to happen next? And we have like kind of some of your typical stuff that you see in Exorcist movies where the two priests are going back and forth with her, and she's like kind of quoting family members and trying to get in their heads. But then it goes to another level when her sister calls the cops on them, and she's taken out in an ambulance. And this is where I was saying that she was a full deadite, because she essentially just attacks the people on the ambulance. The ambulance sort of like implodes.
Yeah.
By her demonic power. And then she just like kind of runs off into the night. And then by the end of episode 5, they say that she's been missing for 2 days. So
one of the things, so we're building up to like what is essentially the mid-season reveal.
Right.
Because like you, one of my biggest issues with the show in the first half of season 1 is things felt they were moving too quickly.
Yeah.
Like Angela, Gina Davis's character, the mother, like her daughter was just involved in a car accident where her friend died. She doesn't want to leave her room. She doesn't want to eat. She's obviously depressed. She goes to the priest and is like, I think my daughter is possessed. And I'm like, whoa, that is a huge leap.
Yeah.
Given the circumstances.
Right.
And then, like you said, episode 4, we're like, or episode 5, we're doing like a full-blown 2 priests on the possessed girl exorcist. I'm like, what the fuck is this show going to do for the next 4.5 episodes, 5 episodes?
Right.
And then you get the major reveal right at the end, really, of episode 5.
Right.
That the reason Angela is so quick to assume possession, the reason that there's been some hinting from the salesman that he wants her, or I need you to get, he keeps telling Casey, you have to bring me to her. You have to get, and you're like, what's going on here? And of course, we get, as this reveal is happening, you get some of the most blatant homages. I don't even want to call them homages, just like straight takes from The Exorcist. The cab pulling up in front of the house with the fog hazing over the probably the most famous shot from the original movie. It was on the poster art of Father Merrin arriving at the house.
Right.
And it's this person in a hat, just like Father Merrin,
Right.
answers the door, just like Father Merrin, except it's Cagney from Cagney and Lacey. It's Sharon Gless, and she goes, "I'm here to see my daughter. I'm Chris McNeil." And we find out that, in fact, Angela, Gina Davis's character, is adult Reagan from the original Exorcist. Bum, bum, bum. And it's like, now that makes sense. And what I really love is that this is a mid-season reveal.
Right.
And this wasn't a cheap season-ending cliffhanger.
Right, good point.
Because had this been the end of season 1, I would have been like, oh, come on. But
yes.
it pays off. The only complaint that I really had through these first 5 episodes was, whoa, this whole story is just blowing by way too quick. And you figure out, okay, there's a reason why it's paced this way, because it's all setting up for a far bigger showdown.
Right.
In the second half of the season,
right,
where now we have the 2 main characters, or the main character from the original film and her mother are back. I love the Bible, and it says like 2 rags, which was her nickname, Reagan's nickname in the original film.
Right.
And my first thought when I saw that going all the way back was, oh shit, Gina Davis does kind of look like an adult Linda Blair.
Right. And it made me wonder, right? Like, did they ever think about casting Linda Blair? Like, was it always that they were going to cast another actress because they wanted to kind of have this reveal? Because, I mean, obviously, if you cast Linda Blair, people are
That's the thing. I think if Linda Blair would have accepted this role, you're basically telling everyone, this is a direct continuation of the movie.
Right.
This is the same character. By casting Gina Davis, not only are you building on the success of her career, because no offense to Linda Blair, Gina Davis is especially in 2016, a much bigger mainstream name. Yeah. She had just come off Commander-in-Chief, much bigger mainstream name, but also it does help to hide the fact of what the show is going to do.
Right.
Like, if you cast Linda Blair, I mean, at that point, Max von Sydow, I think, was still alive. You might as well have had him on the show.
Oh, shit. Well, I was wondering why Ellen Burstyn didn't come in.
So Ellen Burstyn, I think, is actually cast in a role in David Gordon Green's The Exorcist.
Oh, okay. That's cool.
I don't know. I don't know for sure, and I'm almost certain she's not playing Chris McNeil, but she is, I believe, cast in the movie.
Okay. That's interesting. Yeah, that was a really cool twist. I was pretty excited about that. Because you're like, where is this going to go from here? Obviously, they're building to something with like the Pope showing up. There's going to be something with like, we're assuming that the demon, the salesman, is Pazuzu. So
or the salesman is an agent of Pazuzu, who is, or like, it's all working its way back, obviously, to Gina Davis and to Reagan. I keep calling Sharon Gless Cagney because that was like her most famous role, even though that was like 40 years ago. She was also in Burn Notice and Queer as Folk. She's like a pretty big name as far as TV personalities go. And I'm really interested to see, because I'll be honest, one of the fascinating things for me rewatching this is that it feels like a first time watch. I don't remember. I remembered, the one thing I did remember was that Gina Davis was Reagan.
Okay,
that was it.
Yeah.
I didn't remember a lot of the other plot points. I was sitting there going, wow, this is moving really fast, not realizing, schmuck, they have to set that up.
Right.
But no, I'm really looking forward to getting back into the next 5 episodes of this and reviewing it with you probably this weekend.
That's right. Yeah, I think that Danny and I will cover episodes 6 through 10 this Saturday and have it up by the beginning of next week. But Danny and I are back. We're going to be doing 1 episode per week as we normally do. We're covering the entire run of this Exorcist TV show. So it's going to be 4 episodes of this, right? Doing 1 through 5 today, then the second half of season 1, and then we're going to do season 2 like next week, right? But besides that, Danny is always putting out his like short reviews. He's always talking about things that are in the theaters, other things that are streaming. So make sure that you subscribe to the Lastercast channel and check that out. Danny, what do you got up right now?
So I am I know it's your favorite franchise. Terrifier is back in movie theaters for one night only. We're recording this on the 19th. So I have a ticket to the 10 o'clock show tonight. Now, whether or not I will be awake to go and watch a woman get cut in half vertically, I don't know. But I might tempt fate and go see Terrifier tonight, and I'll probably throw up a short review of that. I saw this really cool Shudder movie called Influencer. I have a short, like 45-second review up on our channel. You guys check that out. And I want to do this, give a little promotion. I actually got to guest on a buddy of mine's podcast called Puppet Masters and Castle Freaks. They are a full Charles Band universe podcast, the most exclusive Charles Band universe podcast that is out there. They're available on all podcast platforms. And we recorded yesterday an episode about the 1979 film Tourist Trap. Really underrated horror film. It's streaming on Tubi if you want to watch it. And that episode that I recorded with them yesterday will be out on August 4th. As far as what else I have, we did our Wes Craven month. We did our Exorcist 3, which I thought we did a great job with Exorcist 3. I love that movie. Yeah. The Influencer short, and probably going to see next week. Talk to Me comes out. And I'm super excited about that movie. That movie looks so scary that Charlotte patently refuses to see it.
Okay, all right.
And this is a girl who saw the original Exorcist at 9 years old.
Wow.
But there's about 3 or 4 movies that she's been absolutely terrified by. The last one, of course, being Smile. The last one before that being Insidious. She heard her name, so she popped in. And yeah, you want to go see Talk to Me? That new horror movie with the hand? No, thanks. She said no thanks. Yeah. So I cannot wait to see that. I'm very excited about that. And that's it. And I throw up reviews whenever I watch something interesting. I watched one Shudder movie. I really enjoyed it. Did a 40-second review. I saw another Shudder movie. Didn't really like it, so I don't choose to talk about it.
Yeah, we usually, almost always, we just talk about the stuff we enjoy. Every so often, we set ourselves up to talk about something that we don't.
And then every once in a while, Texas Chainsaw Massacre for Netflix comes out, and I just got to get that anger out.
You got to vent. Yes. But, Danny, I had a really good time talking about the first 5 episodes of The Exorcist show. And I'm actually going over to my other channel right now and talk about Secret Invasion.
Another show I have to catch up on.
Yeah.
How many episodes is that for the season?
There's 6, and we just got up to episode 5 today. So.
Okay, good. So when it's over, I'll binge, because I know I'm going to have to watch Secret Invasion, and I have to watch Miss Marvel because the Marvels are coming out soon.
The Marvels, yeah.
I still haven't finished She-Hulk. I'm so far behind.
I'm like
Candlebox. I'm so far behind.
Oh my God. We had to end on that note. Jesus. Okay. Anyway, y'all have a good one. We will see you next week for The Exorcist.